Are you ready to embrace aging with vitality and purpose? Welcome to Essential Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Mikel Segal. Let's dive in. Okay, well, welcome everyone. And today we have our special guest, Krystal Sodaitis. And Krystal, welcome. And love to hear, maybe you could share with the guest a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and all that stuff.
Yeah, great. So, my name's Krystal Sodaitis. I am a pediatrician by training, and about 10, 12 years ago, I transitioned to be healthcare executive. So, I work for a health plan in a leadership role overseeing medical management. And then about 5 years ago, I decided to become a life coach. The life coach tools that I was learning about, I identified as being really beneficial as a tool in my leadership belt. And I got certified as a life coach thinking that it would help me get promoted and to be an effective leader. And it actually did. Along the way, I started doing some one-on-one coaching. I was initially coaching twice exceptional adolescents and young adults. Twice
Mm,
exceptional is a term that we use when someone is intellectually gifted and also has a disability. And often those disabilities are developmental disabilities like ADHD and autism. And then I slowly further focused my attention on physicians who have a neurodiversity. It could be
mm.
ADHD, autism, obsessive compulsive disorder, social anxiety. And I still work as a full-time healthcare executive and also coach not only physicians, but also highly intelligent people who identify as being neurodiverse.
Very cool. So, what led you into that path of sort of that specific niche of neurodivergence and highly gifted?
Well, as physicians, I believe that most physicians are intellectually gifted in some way. You have to be that smart in order to get through the rigors of medical school and training. And many physicians have children, and those children are also highly gifted. And as parents in the modern age, when you have a child that you identify as being gifted, you start searching. How do I support my gifted child? And there are a bazillion hits. There are a million different resources for parents of gifted children. But where it falls off is when those children, and when I think of that age, I'm thinking like elementary school age, preschool age, elementary school age. But when they become adolescents and young adults, there's
Mhm.
almost no support. At least there wasn't when I was starting 5 years ago. And as I was learning more and more about this population of people, I also started to learn more and more about the enormous amount of anxiety, failure, depression that also is very prevalent in that population. So I started really looking at young adults and adolescents, and we know that, you know, residents are just a stone's throw outside of adolescence. And
Yeah.
so it just became, as I started coaching more and I started coaching more physicians, I have a lot of neurodivergent people in my family, and I just developed an affinity to really
Mm.
help them. I do not have ADHD or autism. In fact, my strength lies in executive functioning, which is what's generally weak in people with ADHD and often autism. So it was a really nice match. And I felt that not only do I see what their gifts are, because everyone has their own individual gifts, but sort of my gifts match where they're a little bit weaker.
No, I like that. That's kind
Thanks.
of an interesting and like way to look at it in terms of just kind of aligning with your strengths. So,
Exactly.
yeah. First of all, like how, if someone's wondering if they are neurodivergent or their child is not neurodivergent, what would you suggest for them as a start?
Well, I mean, I think that especially in a child, if you're looking, your pediatrician is always the first place to start, especially for something like ADHD or autism, anxiety, social anxiety.
Mhm.
What we find though is that many pediatricians are underprepared for the onslaught of, diagnosis, and will often refer to a either neurodevelopmental psychologist to
Mhm.
do testing. They might refer to developmental behavioral pediatrics or pediatric neurology for, further evaluation. You don't need those subspecialists for especially something that's relatively straightforward like ADHD or anxiety. But when you start to get into the nuances, especially when it's coupled with giftedness, it can be
Mhm.
really tricky. The issue with giftedness is that because gifted people can typically handle a higher cognitive load than people who are not intellectually gifted. And so that can mask, they can come up with coping strategies so
Mhm.
that if you are gifted and dyslexic, it might take you 2 hours to read a book or read the one-page sheet that you need to read for elementary school. But once you've read it, you know it. You don't have to go back, and to answer those questions, you don't have to go back and reread it. You know the answers, and you don't have to. If you have ADHD and you are gifted, then you don't need 50 examples to understand a mathematical concept. You get it in about three if it doesn't come intrinsically to you.
Right.
So a lot of gifted children are the basic mathematics is basically self-taught. It's just sort of intrinsic to them. So the giftedness can really hide the neurodiversity, but at the same time, the neurodiversity can hide the giftedness.
Mhm.
So if you are dyslexic and you're really having trouble, decoding the words, standing up and reading, especially reading out loud, that can be perceived as an intellectual disability rather than just a reading disability.
Right.
So when it comes to for that reason, sometimes if you have a sense that either your child isn't learning the same way that other kids are learning, or can't hold attention the way other kids can hold attention, if your pediatrician sort of comes up with a dead end, then you might want to move forward to a full neuropsychological evaluation.
Okay. So, but now in terms of adults, like if say someone's listening and they're thinking, oh, maybe I have a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of,
Yeah.
ADHD or OCD or something like that.
Yeah.
What do I do if I
Yeah.
think that I might
So
be affected?
I think for adults, there is a big place for self-diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're not looking for work accommodations, you're not looking for medications. You can decide that you have. I know plenty of people who have never been formally evaluated and who just say, "Yeah, I have ADHD," and
Mm-hmm.
they manage it in different ways. Sometimes it's finding the right coach. Sometimes it's coming up with your own strategies because many of these people are gifted. They can come up with their own strategies to a certain extent, and some of it really is just accepting the way your brain works. Many people with ADHD struggle with household organization, and so they find somebody to help them organize their household, or they put that task onto their spouse or partner who is much better at household organization. But let's say maybe it is affecting your work, or you're thinking that you want to have medication, you want accommodations, then um, a definitely your primary care provider is a place to start. But similar to what I said about the kids, is many primary care providers they're not comfortable diagnosing these conditions in adults, mostly because it's pretty new. That adult diagnosis is a relatively new phenomenon. And
Mm-hmm.
so really many adult physicians don't feel comfortable making those diagnoses. And so they might refer also to a neurologist or for neuropsychological evaluation. I will say also for women, it's incredibly difficult. I don't want to say that. Let me start again. I will say for women, there's a nuance because the criteria for the diagnosis that we all know that is in the DSM-4, those are based on those are male-based presentations, and women can present very differently from that. Finding my recommendation for a woman is if your primary care provider doesn't feel comfortable or says something, unfortunately, women I know still get still get, comments like, well, you hold down a full-time job. You can't possibly have ADHD, or you're married. You can't have autism. And so, but if they intrinsically know and they can feel that something is off, then I would encourage them to find someone who has experience diagnosing neurodiversity in women. And there are plenty of online resources for that right now. There are plenty of online practitioners for that right now.
Okay, good. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. And so, how do you think having a neurodivergent brain affects wellness in women?
It affects women really profoundly because there are so many societal messages about the way we are supposed to be, in quotations,
Hmm.
and many of these traits um, go against that. I'll give you an example for like autism.
Hmm.
Many autistic women, they have difficulty engaging in the world, just engaging in the world. It can be very overwhelming to, especially if you have to go out into the workplace and engage with different people, different sights, different sounds, and then come home and be expected to mother more people, right? To care for them, to have them sit on their lap. And so if you're tired of people talking to you, if you're overwhelmed by people talking to you all day, and then you come home and your children want to talk to you all day, that can be really hard, right? And now you're thinking like, I'm a terrible mother. I'm not even supposed to be working outside the home, and I am. And now when I come home, I don't want to talk to my kids. One that I work with a lot of people on is household organization. The laundry seems to be the biggest, right? Piles and laundry. And these are two things that take organizing, paperwork and books and that sort of thing, and laundry take an enormous amount of executive functioning, which can be very weak, especially in people with ADHD. And
Hmm.
just to give a definition of executive functioning is essentially made up of multiple different domains, but basically it's the way we plan and execute tasks.
Hmm.
So just being able to plan, okay, I'm going to take the dirty laundry from the basket or wherever. I'm going to put it into the washing machine. I'm going to get the soap. I'm going to make sure I have enough soap. I'm going to know how to use the washing machine, and then I'm going to transfer it into the dryer, and I'm going to know how to use that. And then I have to get it out, and then I have to fold it, and then I have to put it away. Each one of those can present a hurdle for some people.
Mm. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. It would have been laundry would have been the the top task that
Yeah,
I struggle with.
yeah. So, and you asked, how does that affect wellness? It affects wellness because we judge ourselves.
Yeah.
We judge ourselves and we think, I'm a terrible mother. I'm a terrible housekeeper. I'm a terrible wife. I can't have people over because I have had clients who said, I can't have people in my house because I just have piles of laundry on my couch.
Mm. Right.
And so we don't, how we talk to ourselves. And then it can also affect our wellness in terms of, we talked about being able to, executive functioning being planning our day, right? Or
Mhm.
executive functioning being around planning. How do we plan our day? How do I plan my day so that I can maybe get it to an exercise class, maybe get out and take a walk, maybe have a 5-minute meditation?
Right.
It and so even just having the time for
Mhm.
those essential self-care activities can
Mhm.
be really impacted by being neurodiverse.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one is the way we kind of talk to ourselves. So if we do have an understanding of what's going on, then obviously we can maybe have a little bit more self-compassion or maybe find some other tools to
Right,
help with the laundry and the organization. And then the second piece is the building into our day some self-care activities
right,
that for
exactly.
some people might be, easy to do, and obviously with a neurodivergent brain, more challenging.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can give an example just from my own life.
Yeah.
For my exercise routine, I create I create basically very, very extravagant muscle memories so
Mm.
that basically I just wake up in the morning and before my brain has even really clicked on, I'm sitting in a exercise studio. And every morning I think to myself, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? Why am I not in bed? I'm still sleepy. But because I have this very like organized, I don't even think twice about not doing. There's no decision point.
Right.
But when you potentially have ADHD and you don't create those, and you can't create those because that's not how your brain was designed,
Hmm.
every moment is a decision point, and there's an opportunity for you to decide, hey, I'm not going to go.
Right. Yeah, you could see how that would be much more challenging to get to
Yeah,
the gym in
yeah,
the morning. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what's the most surprising thing you've found working with people who have neurodivergence?
They don't see their gifts and their strengths,
Mm.
and they don't see how to, it's not really a surprise so much, that much of a surprise, but they don't see how to use that strength in order to support where they're weak. I was coaching an architect actually. He was
Mm-hmm.
brilliant, but he really struggled. He was studying for his architecture exams. He was really struggling because also, I don't know if he had a formal diagnosis of dyslexia, but he definitely had difficulty reading. He had very slow processing with reading, and he had a very poor short-term memory when it came to things he read. But
Mm.
as we were coaching, I discovered that, and he just sort of like said it very casually, that he has a photographic memory for anything he draws.
Mm.
And so we created and we came up with the strategy how when he was studying and even like during meetings and whatever, anything that was critical, he would just draw it. And he was an architect. So there was plenty that he was studying that needed to be drawn. And once he had drawn it, he didn't have to go back and read it again. It was done. It was hard coded.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was amazing.
So it's like finding your strengths and using them.
Yeah.
Great. Just as we're kind of coming to the end, what is one thing or a few other things you'd like the audience to know about your work with respect to neurodivergence and
There's nothing wrong with your brain.
Mhm.
We all have areas where we excel and we all have areas where we struggle. Like I said, certain, especially ADHD is known to also be paired with creativity. And so even though we say attention deficit disorder, no one accuses me of having creativity deficit disorder, even though I'm, you know, not a very creative person at all, although working on it.
Mhm.
So we all have our strengths. We all have areas where we struggle. There's nothing wrong with your brain. Don't make yourself wrong for not being able to do something, for needing help where maybe your neighbor doesn't need help in. And if you truly, I think that for many people, having a formal diagnosis is very validating because now they say, oh, I understand now why my whole life, I can only do this, or I can't stand to, you know, I can't stand this noise, or I can't stand to be touched, or whatever it is. And so I do think if that is your case, then it is worthwhile to get a diagnosis, a formal diagnosis.
Mhm. Thanks so much. So how can people reach you or learn more if they want to know more about what you do?
Yeah, thanks. I'll put a link for the show notes, or I'll send you a link for the show notes for a tool I have, like top 5 things to do if you think you're
Great.
neurodiverse. So I've got a little ebook, and then they can find me always on my website, which is neurodiversedocs.com. And you don't have to be a physician to work with me. My strength is in, like I said, twice exceptionality, but there's no IQ check at the door.
Love it. Okay, well, thanks so much. It's been great to chat with you, and thanks for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with the audience.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye. That's it for another episode of Essential Wellness. If you are enjoying listening to this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with others so everyone can find us. See you next time.